Hello everyone, I am Suchita Wali, Assistant Professor, Government SKSJTI, Bangalore. I'll be discussing about the experiments which are carried out in the Environmental Engineering Laboratory. The code of the subject is 17CVL77. So this is just the introduction to the Environmental Engineering Laboratory. So this laboratory, which is used to determine the various parameters or characteristics of the water sample or wastewater sample. I will be explaining about the various experiments: pH, total hardness, total acidity, chloride content, dissolved oxygen, and residual chlorine. The other experiments will be dealt later. Moving on to the introduction part, let me talk about the importance of water. As we all know, water is practically available everywhere in various forms, that is solid, liquid, gaseous, and all the forms are important to human being. Without water, life doesn't exist. Water is vital for survival. Water is a necessity. Water is a comfort. Water is a luxury. We all know about the water cycle or hydrological cycle. So the various processes involved in it, that is evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, interception, percolation, evapotranspiration, and finally it flows as surface runoff and joins the water body. So this water, whose demand is increasing day by day by leaps and bounds, has made it a great natural resource. So the water, its density is important, its weight is important. The properties of water: solid, liquid, gaseous. The energy of water is important. Density makes the ship to float. The energy of water runs the turbine. It helps us to produce electricity. So in all these ways, the water is required by all the living organisms for their survival. So once the necessity is fulfilled, next is the comfort. We need water to feel comfortable, to have a luxurious living. So this demand of water is increasing with increase in population. There is increased industrialization, there is increased agricultural activity, there is increased infrastructural development. All this increases the demand of water. Hence, the importance of water is increasing day by day by leaps and bounds, and it is one of the greatest natural resource available on the earth. Now, once this water is available, the location, the source, the quality play an important role. Hence, depending on that, we need to treat that water for the required usage. So moving on to the surfaces, where the source is the surface source. So the various sources of water may be surface, subsurface, river, lake, stream, ponds, ocean. These are the surface sources. Subsurface, it is the groundwater, the wells, tube wells, infiltration galleries. All these come under the subsurface sources. So The water supply is mainly done from the surface sources. The water is treated from the surface sources. But when this is not sufficient, we go in for subsurface source. So again in surface source, we have fresh water, saline water. So saline water, though it is present in large amount, large quantity, 71% of the earth is surrounded with oceans. We are not using that water. The utilization is not there, only in cases or when there are no other surface sources, then they go in for ocean water where desalination process has to be done, and then that water, particular water, has to be utilized. But we mainly depend on these surface sources or freshwater resources. So these sources are going to again depend on the hydrological cycle. So the water from any source will not be of the required quality. So when I want to utilize it for a particular purpose, I need to check its quality, whether it is potable, whether it is wholesome, whether it does not contain any impurities. Then the treatment plays a very, very important role. Now, once the water has to be treated, in what way it has to be treated, what are the processes involved, what is the requirement, can be done only and only if I know the various parameters. And that testing of the parameters is done in environmental engineering laboratory. Moving on to the uses of water: domestic use, industrial use, agricultural use, fire use. So we need water for so many things. And this has created a huge demand. So domestic use, that is the municipal use, we need it for drinking, cooking, washing, bathing, flushing, gardening. Industrial use, all the industrial activities, for manufacturing processes. Agricultural use or irrigational activities, what we say, to grow crops, to have a good yield, we need water. So all the water which is going to be utilized here needs to be maintained with a good quality. The water is also required when there is sudden fire outbreak. So in this way, the uses of water are increasing, the demand is increasing, and we need to maintain a good quality whenever it is picked up from any source. Now, why do we need to treat? What do we do? So we analyze the physical, chemical, biological characteristics of water or even wastewater. So once water is utilized by us, the water which is let out, that is the unused water, or the water which is added with various unwanted substances, finally ends up as wastewater. So after the utilization for various purposes, the excess water which comes out gets contaminated, polluted, and we call that as wastewater. Now, treatment of water is very, very essential. At the same time, treatment of wastewater also is very, very essential. Before the water is supplied from any source, it has to be treated because the quality has to be maintained so that it is not going to create any ill health, any hazard to human health. And once it is consumed, once the excess water is developed as wastewater, this wastewater again cannot be disposed or discharged directly without any treatment. In case we do that, if it joins any natural river's water body, it is going to pollute that entire source of water. Hence, treatment of water before supplying and treatment of wastewater before its discharge play a very, very important role. Now, this treatment again depends on the physical properties, chemical properties, and the biological properties of that water sample. Hence, we need to analyze these properties, and that is done in the environmental engineering laboratory. So whenever I treat any water sample, I should know the parameters so that if it is acidic, I need to adjust, optimize the pH. If it is basic, I need to optimize. In that way, I need to know each and every parameter. If it is very hard, if it is having high chloride content, high fluoride content, what do I do? How do I treat? If it is very hard, what is the softening process I need to carry on? In this way, all the testing processes, the treatment processes will be decided by the results which we obtain in the laboratory. Now, moving on to analyzing. How do I analyze? I need to collect a sample. So, when I collect a sample, it should be a true representative. So, the water sample, the wastewater sample, whichever is collected, has to be a true representative. It should have true characteristics. So, if in case I'm taking a sample from any river, I shouldn't collect a sample at the shore. I should go a bit inside where there is a uniform flow, where I can get a uniform mixture of that sample so that the properties is analyzed properly. So such a sample, we call it as a true representative. Next, when I collect that sample, there are so many formalities. I need to write down the date, the place, the source, the person's name who is collecting. All those details are to be noted down on that particular bottle or a can in which I'm collecting. Now we have different types of sampling. So how these samples are collected, depending on that, we have different types of sampling. So the sampling, again, it can be done manually or automatically. And coming to types, it is grab sampling, random sampling, integrated sampling. When I just take one sample and come, I'm grabbing it. Random at every 2 hours, at every 6 hours, at every 24 hours, when we collect a sample at particular source, particular time, but at different timings, at different points in the same source, it is called random sampling. And integrated sampling, at the same time, at different points, the sample is going to be collected, mixed, and then tested, and that we call as integrated sampling. So first of all, sample collection plays an important role. It should be a true representative. Finally, after the collection, it has to reach the lab immediately, and the testing has to be done at the earliest without wasting time. Because in case we delay the testing, then many reactions can take place in that water sample and the results may vary. We may not get the accurate results. So once the collection is done, the time between the collection and the testing analysis should be at least as possible. Now, there are certain precautions which need to be taken during the collection of samples. You have to take a sterilized bottle or a clean can in which you are going to collect the sample. In case we are taking it for physical and chemical properties, we can take plastic cans, plastic bottles. But in case we are going in for biological testing, then utmost care has to be taken where the sample has to be collected in a sterilized bottle. Then the sample, when it is collected, in case it's a tap water, it's a borewell water, the water has to run for few minutes. Then the sample has to be collected. You have to clean the tap, collect the sample, see that the water enters the bottle directly. It doesn't come in contact with anything outside, with the atmosphere, with the dust particles, even with the person's hand who is holding the bottle. Immediately after collection, you need to close it with a lid, with a stopper, and take it to the lab immediately and test it. So the various physical parameters such as pH, color, odor, temperature, turbidity have to be tested. The chemical parameters such as chloride, fluoride, nitrate, total hardness, POD, COD can be tested. Biological parameters, total count, E. coli, B. coli, the presumptive test, the confirmative test, the complete test can be determined. In this way, all the parameters in the laboratory are determined and the sample is examined whether it is fit, unfit, what is the treatment to be given, and how can it be treated for various uses. And at the same time, even the wastewater sample is collected in the same manner. The various parameters are also tested for the wastewater, and it is treated. The characters, the parameters which we come to know, they can be determined, they can be adjusted, they can be treated. Once it is treated, then only it can be discharged into any source. So, in this way, this sources sampling. Then we go to different types where we analyze the parameters. Then we collect it with utmost care. Sometimes the collection and the analysis may be delayed. At such a time, we need to add certain preservatives so that the reactions, any chemical reaction or biological reaction, won't take place and the sample is not going to be disturbed, and we will have a true representative, and hence finally the sample is going to determine, the values are going to be determined, and the treatment is going to be decided, what treatment has to be given. In this way, this laboratory plays a very, very important role where the water which is vital for survival should be of good quality, should be of standards, should be of permissible limits which are given by the Bureau of Indian Standards. Each parameter has a standard limit. For example, hardness, it should be between 300 to 600 mg per liter. For example, pH, it should be between 6.5 to 8.5. For example, nitrate, it should not be more than 45 mg per liter. Acidity, not more than 50 mg per liter. Total alkalinity, not more than 200 mg per liter. So we should know all the standards and the permissible limits given by the Bureau of Indian Standards, and we have to maintain the characters, the parameters of these water. The quality has to be maintained. It has to be within the permissible limit when it is used for domestic water supply or even when the wastewater is going to be discharged into any water source. So this is all about environmental engineering laboratory, and further on we'll go on deciding about each parameter, how it is tested, what are its applications, what is the significance, what is the procedure, if it's a titration, if it's a digital instrument, how we need to calibrate it, how we need to use the sample, how we can use the testing, how can we determine the uh, sample's value, its pH value, its hardness value. Everything can be tabulated, calculated, and finally we can conclude whether such a sample is fit for domestic usage or not. Thank you.